I sat frozen at the dinner table, my fork halfway to my mouth, as my fiancé's mother turned to me with the sweetest smile and whispered in Turkish to her son, "She's pretty enough, I suppose, but did you notice her roots need touching up? And those shoes, clearly she shops at discount stores." My stomach dropped, not because of what she said about me, because I understood every single word. Marcus didn't know I spoke Turkish. Nobody did. I'd learned it in college, spent a semester abroad in Istanbul, kept that part of my life quiet because it never seemed relevant. Over 3 years of dating, it had never come up. And now, sitting in his mother's dining room in suburban Ohio on a Friday night in September, I realized that little secret was about to change everything. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up. 6 months earlier, everything was perfect. The kind of perfect that makes you nervous because you know, deep down, that perfect doesn't last forever. I'm Ashley, 32 years old. I work as a project manager for a mid-sized tech company in Columbus. Good salary, decent benefits, a 401k I actually contribute to. I live in a renovated townhouse on the east side, the kind of place that makes my mom proud when she visits. It's not fancy, but it's mine. I bought it myself 4 years ago, right after my divorce from Derek, and every time I walk through that door, I feel like I've accomplished something real. Marcus came into my life at exactly the right moment. I'd spent 2 years focusing on work, rebuilding my confidence, going to therapy to understand why I'd stayed with Derek for 5 years, when I knew by year 2 that it wasn't working. By the time I met Marcus at a friend's birthday party in March, I was ready. Happy on my own, but open to something more. He was easy to fall for. Tall, dark hair that always looked like he'd just run his fingers through it, worked in real estate, and actually seemed to understand why the housing market mattered. He laughed at my jokes. He remembered things I said. When I mentioned offhand that I loved the coffee at this little place downtown, he started meeting me there on Tuesday mornings before work. Small gestures that added up. 3 months in, he asked me to be exclusive. By month 6, he was talking about moving in together. By month 9, which is now, he'd proposed. A simple diamond, nothing ostentatious, because he knew me well enough to know that I'd hate anything performative. He proposed on a Tuesday morning at our coffee shop. The barista had the ring hidden in a napkin. When Marcus got down on one knee, I cried so hard I could barely say yes. Everything felt solid, real, like the kind of love that survives because it's built on something that actually matters. His mother, Karen, was another story. I'd met her twice before that dinner. Once at a family birthday barbecue, where she'd made a comment about how I was so independent, in a way that clearly meant something like, doesn't know her place. And once at Marcus's office holiday party, where she'd spent most of the evening asking me what my parents did for work and whether I'd ever considered having children, while looking me up and down like she was assessing breeding stock. But this dinner was supposed to be different. This was the get-to-know the fiancé dinner, just the 3 of us. Karen had invited us to her house, a sprawling colonial in New Albany, with a 3-car garage and a front yard maintained by a professional landscaping company. The kind of house that screams old money, or at least the desperate performance of old money. Marcus was nervous. I could tell because he kept adjusting his watch and asking me if I was okay in the car ride over. "I'm fine," I'd said, squeezing his hand. "Your mom can't be that bad." He'd laughed, but it was the kind of laugh that meant he wasn't entirely convinced. The evening started fine. Karen had cooked, or more likely had hired someone to cook, a beautiful roasted chicken with rosemary potatoes, and a salad with some kind of artisanal dressing. She was polite, asked me questions about work, seemed genuinely interested in my answers. I relaxed. Maybe I'd been wrong about her. Maybe she was just awkward, the way some people are when they're trying too hard. We were 3/4 of the way through dinner when it happened. Karen reached over and patted Marcus's arm, and she said something in rapid Turkish. Turkish is a language that sounds like you're always slightly annoyed, even when you're not. It's got these hard consonants, these rolling sounds that seem to express exasperation naturally. But what she said wasn't just exasperated, it was calculated. She was insulting me, directly, to my fiancé, in front of me, and she had no idea I could hear her. I watched Marcus's face go red. He glanced at me, then back at his mother. His jaw tightened. "Mom," he said in English, "a warning." But Karen just smiled, completely unbothered, and took another sip of her wine. That's when I knew. That's when I understood that this dinner, this moment, was going to matter in ways I couldn't quite predict yet. Something had shifted. Some invisible door had opened, and I could see exactly what Karen thought of me when she thought I wasn't listening. The question was, what was I going to do about it? I set down my fork carefully. My hands were steady, which surprised me. My heart was hammering, but my hands were completely steady. I picked up my wine glass and took a sip, buying myself time. Marcus was watching me now, waiting to see if I'd noticed, if I'd somehow understood the insult even though I had no reason to. Karen was watching the chicken on her plate, completely satisfied with herself. And I was sitting there, holding a secret that suddenly felt like a weapon, trying to figure out whether I should use it. I set down my fork carefully. My hands were steady, which surprised me. My heart was hammering, but my hands were completely steady. I picked up my wine glass and took a sip, buying myself time. Marcus was watching me now, waiting to see if I'd noticed, if I'd somehow understood the insult even though I had no reason to. Karen was watching the chicken on her plate, completely satisfied with herself. And I was sitting there, holding a secret that suddenly felt like a weapon, trying to figure out whether I should use it. The problem was that I didn't use it. Not that night. I spent the rest of dinner playing dumb, smiling when appropriate, complimenting the chicken, which was admittedly excellent, asking Karen about her book club and her tennis league, and whatever other things wealthy suburban mothers do to fill their time. I was so good at pretending that I almost convinced myself I'd misheard her, that maybe my Turkish had gotten rusty, that maybe I'd misunderstood the context. But I hadn't. I knew exactly what she'd said, and more importantly, I knew what it meant. When we got home that night, Marcus was quiet. He helped me with my coat, made us both tea, and sat on the couch next to me with this expression, like he was trying to solve a math problem in his head. "Did my mom say something weird to you tonight?" he finally asked. My stomach did a flip. This was it. This was the moment where I could tell him the truth, where I could say, "Actually, yes, she called me a discount store shoplifter with bad roots, and she did it right in front of me because she thought I didn't understand Turkish." Instead, I said, "No, why?" "You just seemed quiet at the end of dinner. I know my mom can be a lot." I leaned my head on his shoulder. "I'm fine. Your mom was lovely." He kissed the top of my head and dropped it, but I could feel him not quite believing me. That's when everything started to fall apart. Over the next 2 weeks, I couldn't shake what Karen had said. It wasn't the insults themselves. I'd been insulted before, and I'd survive being insulted again. It was the calculation behind them, the fact that she'd done it deliberately, knowing I was sitting right there. It was a power move, a test maybe, a way of establishing dominance. But what bothered me more was Marcus's reaction. He'd gone red. He'd told her to stop. But he'd done it in English, which meant he was appealing to some sense of decorum rather than actually defending me. And the worst part? He hadn't told me about it. He'd just let it hang there between us like a ghost. So I started testing the waters. "Does your mom speak English at home?" I asked him one Tuesday morning, casual, over coffee. "Mostly. Why?" "Just wondering. She seems to switch between languages a lot." He shrugged. "Her parents were Turkish immigrants. She grew up speaking both. She and my dad used to speak Turkish when they didn't want my brother and me to understand something." "Did it work?" "Not really. My brother picked it up eventually. I never bothered." I sipped my coffee and said nothing. The next weekend, Marcus's brother Brandon came over. They looked nothing alike. Brandon was shorter, stockier, had the kind of face that looked perpetually angry, even when he was smiling. He was a divorce attorney, the kind of guy who made 6 figures and never let anyone forget it. "So you're the woman who finally got my brother to stop being a commitment-phobic nightmare," Brandon said, shaking my hand. His grip was too firm. Everything about him was too firm. "That's me," I said, smiling. "Don't fuck it up," he added. And I genuinely couldn't tell if he was joking. Marcus laughed like he was joking. But later, when Brandon had left, I asked Marcus if his family always communicated like they were in a hostage negotiation. What do you mean? Your brother told me not to screw things up. Your mom insulted me in a language she thought I didn't understand. It feels like there's a lot of passive-aggressive stuff happening. Marcus looked genuinely confused. My mom didn't insult you. How would you know? You don't speak Turkish. He went very still. Are you saying she did? And that's when I realized I'd made a mistake, because now I had to choose, tell him the truth and reveal that I'd been lying for 2 weeks, or back down and let him think I was being paranoid. I chose door number 3, which was stupid. No, I said. I'm just saying that if she had, I wouldn't be able to tell, and that seems like a weird dynamic. He didn't believe me. I could see it in his face. But he also didn't push it, which was worse. He just went quiet and distant for the rest of the evening. By the time the following Friday rolled around, I'd made my decision. I was going to tell him. We were engaged. We were supposed to be building a life together. A life couldn't be built on a foundation of lies, even small ones. I planned the whole thing. I'd cook dinner, something simple, something that wouldn't distract me. I'd wait until we were both relaxed. I'd explain about Istanbul, about the semester abroad, about why I'd never mentioned it. And then I'd tell him what his mother had said. It was a good plan, logical, honest. It lasted exactly 45 minutes after Marcus got home. He walked in with this expression I'd never seen before. His jaw was clenched. His eyes were red-rimmed like he'd been crying or was about to start. "We need to talk," he said. Those are never good words. I'd heard them before, from Derek, right before he'd admitted that he'd been sleeping with his receptionist for 6 months. "Okay," I said slowly. "What's wrong?" "My mom called me. She said you were weird at dinner, that you kept watching her, that you seemed angry. She's worried that you don't like her, and that it's going to cause problems in our relationship." I felt something cold move through my chest. "And what did you tell her?" "I told her that you said you were fine, that nothing was wrong." He paused. "But you weren't fine, were you? You were upset about something and you didn't tell me." "Marcus, so either you don't trust me enough to talk to me about what's bothering you, or you were upset about something and lied about it, and I don't know which one is worse." I stood there, my mouth open, and realized that I'd walked directly into a trap. Karen had manufactured this. She'd called him with this story about me being weird, and now he was upset because he thought I'd been dishonest. Which I had been, but not about what he thought. "I need to tell you something," I said. "Yeah, you do." So I told him everything. About learning Turkish in college, about understanding what his mother had said, about spending 2 weeks deciding whether to tell him, about planning to tell him tonight. When I finished, he was sitting on the couch with his head in his hands. "So my mother insulted you, and instead of telling me, you've been lying about it for 2 weeks, and then my mom called and made it sound like you were the problem, and now I'm the bad guy for being upset." "That's not what I'm saying." "What are you saying, Ashley?" "I'm saying that your mother deliberately said something cruel, knowing I was sitting right there, and you went red but didn't actually do anything about it. So I was trying to figure out what to do, and instead of handling it, I just didn't." He looked at me then, and there was something broken in his expression. "I need to think," he said. "I'm going to go stay at Brandon's for a few days." "Marcus, don't do that. Let's talk about this." But he was already standing up, already moving toward the bedroom to pack a bag. "We are talking," he said, "and what I'm hearing is that you don't trust me, that you don't think I can handle my own mother, that you'd rather lie than tell me what's going on. That's not—" The door closed. And then I was alone in my townhouse, with dinner still cooking on the stove, realizing that I'd somehow managed to make myself the villain in my own story. I called my best friend Jennifer at midnight. She worked in marketing, had been through 3 serious relationships, and had the kind of brutal honesty that I usually appreciated, but was currently dreading. "You lied to him," she said, no preamble, "for 2 weeks. I was going to tell him. But you didn't, and now his mom has gotten in his head and he thinks you're the problem. So what do I do?" There was a long pause. "You fight for him. You show him that this is fixable. You prove that you're trustworthy." "How?" "I don't know, Ash. That's on you." I hung up and spent the rest of the night staring at my ceiling, understanding for the first time that I'd handed Karen exactly the weapon she needed to destroy my relationship. And I'd done it myself. By Sunday, Marcus still hadn't come home. He texted, but only about logistics. I need some space. We should probably talk to a couples counselor. I'm not sure I know you as well as I thought. Those last 6 words played on repeat in my head. By Monday morning, I made a decision that I didn't fully understand at the time. I was going to fight back. Not against Marcus, against Karen. I was going to find out exactly what her problem with me was, and I was going to stop giving her ammunition to use. I called her directly. Karen, it's Ashley. I was wondering if you had time for coffee this week. There was a pause. Of course. How lovely. Thursday at the club? Actually, I was thinking somewhere more private. Maybe your house? Another pause, longer this time. I could almost hear her calculating whether this was a good idea. All right, she finally said. Thursday at 2. I hung up before she could change her mind, and I realized I was shaking. Not from fear, from something else, from anger. For the first time since that dinner, I wasn't sad or confused or trying to figure out what I'd done wrong. I was angry, and I was going to walk into Karen's house on Thursday afternoon and make her understand that she'd picked a fight with the wrong woman. I just didn't know yet exactly how badly it was going to go. Thursday at 2 o'clock, I sat in Karen's living room on a cream-colored sofa that probably cost more than my car, and I realized I'd walked in without a plan. I had anger, sure. I had righteous indignation, but I didn't have a strategy, and Karen was looking at me with this expression like she'd invited me over to discuss flowers or book club recommendations, not to fight for my relationship. "Can I get you something?" she asked, already standing. "Tea? Wine? I have a lovely Sauvignon Blanc." "I'm fine," I said. I wanted to talk about what happened at dinner 2 weeks ago. Her face didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes, a calculation. "At dinner?" she said, settling back into her chair. "Which part exactly?" "The part where you spoke Turkish about me, where you said my roots needed touching up and that I shop at discount stores." For a moment, nothing happened. Then Karen smiled. Not a real smile. The kind of smile that a shark probably makes right before it bites. "Oh," she said softly. "So Marcus told you what I said?" "Marcus didn't tell me anything. I understood you." The color drained from her face. I watched it happen in real time, watched her calculate the implications of that sentence. If I understood Turkish, then I'd known exactly what she said that night, which meant I'd been sitting there listening for 2 weeks without saying anything. "You speak Turkish," she said. It wasn't a question. "I do." "And you didn't tell Marcus?" "No, I didn't." She stood up then, walked to the window, and looked out at her perfectly manicured front yard. When she turned back around, her expression had hardened into something that looked almost like respect, but meaner. "So you're here to what, exactly? Threaten me? Tell me you're going to tell Marcus that I was rude?" "I'm here to tell you that whatever game you're playing, it stops. You called Marcus and told him I was weird at dinner. You tried to make him think I was the problem. And it worked, which is why he's staying at his brother's house and why we might not be getting married." "Good," Karen said. The word hung in the air like a slap. "I beg your pardon?" I said, "Good. My son is making a mistake. You're not right for him. You're ambitious, you're independent. You don't know how to defer to family. You're going to drag him away from everything that matters, and I'm not going to stand by and watch that happen." I felt something crystallize inside me, not anger anymore, clarity. "You're right," I said. "I am ambitious. I am independent. I bought my own house. I got divorced when I realized I was in a bad marriage, instead of staying in it for appearances. I learned Turkish in college because I wanted to understand a different culture. I work hard, I pay my bills, and I don't apologize for any of that." "Exactly," Karen said, like I'd just proved her point. "And Marcus loves those things about me. Or he did, until you convinced him that they meant I didn't trust him." Karen moved toward the door. This conversation was over as far as she was concerned. "I think you should leave." "Not yet," I said, and something in my voice made her stop. You want to know what I really understood that night? Not just the words, the desperation. You're terrified that Marcus is going to leave Ohio, that he's going to build a life that doesn't revolve around you and your country club and your idea of what a good family looks like. So you decided to sabotage us before that could happen. That's not... It is. It's pathetic, actually. And it might have worked, too, except for one thing. I pulled out my phone. I'd done something I wasn't proud of, something that had taken me 3 days and a conversation with Jennifer, but it had been necessary. I'd called Karen's sister, Mara, the one who lived in Istanbul, the one who spoke Turkish and English, and had been on a video call with me for the past 10 minutes while I sat in Karen's living room. I turned the phone around so Mara's face was visible on the screen. "Mara?" Karen went white. Genuinely, physically white, like all the blood had drained out of her face. "Hi, Karen," Mara said, her accent thick. "I heard everything. Every word you just said about Ashley, every word you said 2 weeks ago at dinner, which Ashley recorded and sent to me." I hadn't recorded it, but Karen didn't know that, and Mara, bless her, was a lawyer in Istanbul who'd been appalled to hear what her sister had done. She'd been more than willing to play along. "You recorded me?" Karen's voice was barely above a whisper. "I recorded myself," I said. "I recorded the audio of that dinner. I have you on tape saying exactly what you said about me. I have it in Turkish and English, and I was planning to show it to Marcus until I realized there was a better way to handle this." Karen sank into her chair. "Better how?" she asked. "I'm going to tell Marcus the truth, all of it, about learning Turkish, about understanding what you said, about coming here today. And I'm going to tell him that his mother deliberately insulted me, lied about my behavior to drive a wedge between us, and did it all because she's scared of losing control over his life." "Ashley," Mara started, and I shook my head slightly. She understood. This was the part where I needed to do this alone. "But I'm not going to play the recording. I'm not going to threaten you or blackmail you or do any of the things that would make Marcus feel like he has to choose between us, because I don't want to win that way. I want to win by being honest." "He'll never forgive you for lying about the Turkish," Karen said, and she sounded almost hopeful. "Maybe not, but he'll understand why I lied, and he'll have to look at you and understand why I felt like I needed to. And that's a conversation you don't want to have, Karen, because you know exactly how it's going to end." I stood up. Mara was still on the phone, a silent witness. "One more thing," I said. "If you pull something like this again, if you try to sabotage us, if you spread lies, if you do anything to hurt Marcus or our relationship, I will show him that recording. I will show his family. And I will make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person you are." Karen didn't say anything. She just stared at the phone, at her sister's face, understanding that she'd been outmaneuvered. I hung up with Mara and left. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't wait for Karen to respond. I just walked out of that house and got into my car, and I sat there in the driveway for 5 minutes while my hands shook. Then I drove to Brandon's apartment. Marcus opened the door like he'd been expecting me, which meant his brother had probably called ahead. Or maybe he'd just been waiting for me to show up, hoping. "I need to tell you something," I said, "and I need you to listen to all of it before you say anything." He nodded and stepped aside, and I walked into his brother's minimalist apartment and told him everything. About Istanbul, about the Turkish, about understanding his mother at dinner, about the 2 weeks of lying, about going to see Karen. I didn't mention the recording. I didn't mention Mara. Those were details I could have used as weapons, but I didn't. I just told him the truth, all of it, and when I was done, I sat back and waited. "You learned Turkish in college," he said finally. "Yes, and you never mentioned it." "No, it never came up." "And you understood my mother insulting you?" "Yes." He stood up and walked to the window. It was the same thing his mother had done, and I wondered if that was genetic, the need to turn away when you were processing something difficult. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. "Because I was scared, because I didn't know how you'd react, because I was hoping it wasn't real, that I'd misunderstood. Because I'm an idiot, Marcus. I panicked and I lied and I made everything worse." He turned around. My mother called me this morning. She said you came to see her. I did. She said you threatened her, that you recorded her. I felt my stomach drop. I didn't record her. I recorded myself after dinner, just the audio, so I would remember exactly what she said. But I didn't threaten her. I told her the truth. Which is? That she's sabotaging us because she's scared of losing control. That she insulted me deliberately. That if she does it again, I'll show you the recording and make sure your whole family knows what happened. Marcus closed his eyes. That's not a threat. That's a promise. Yes. He was quiet for a long time. Then he asked, "Do you actually have the recording?" "Yes. And you're not going to show me?" "No, not unless she forces my hand, because if I show you, then you'll feel like you have to choose between us, and I don't want to win that way." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I could see something shifting in his face. Understanding, maybe, or forgiveness. I couldn't quite tell. "You're infuriating," he said. "I know. You lied to me for 2 weeks." "I know. But you also went to my mother's house and basically told her that if she messes with you again, you'll destroy her reputation. Which is kind of badass." I laughed and it came out shaky. That was not the reaction I was expecting. "My mother called me because she was scared, genuinely scared. She said something in Turkish, I had to ask my brother to translate, about how you were more dangerous than she'd realized." He paused. "I think she meant it as a bad thing, but honestly, I think it's kind of hot." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so I did both. Marcus crossed the room and pulled me into a hug, and I pressed my face into his chest and let myself breathe for the first time in 3 weeks. "We're going to couples counseling," he said into my hair. "Yes. And you're going to learn not to lie to me." "I will. And I'm going to learn to stand up to my mother better." "You are." He pulled back just far enough to look at me. "And we're still getting married, but on one condition." "What's that?" "You teach me Turkish. If my mother's going to insult my fiancé, I want to understand it myself." I kissed him then, and he kissed me back, and for the first time since that dinner, I felt like maybe we were actually going to be okay. The wedding was 6 months later, in May. We did it small, just 50 people, at a venue downtown that Karen was not invited to. I sent her an invitation anyway, just to be clear about the boundaries, but she didn't come. Marcus said she called and made a comment about how she didn't want to watch her son make a mistake, and he hung up on her. We've been married 3 years now. Marcus learned Turkish, though he's not great at it. We go to couples counseling every other week, and it's helped. Karen has backed off significantly, though she still makes snide comments occasionally, and Marcus has learned to shut them down immediately. The townhouse got upgraded. We renovated the kitchen, added a bathroom, and we're thinking about buying a bigger place when we have kids. My work got a promotion. Marcus's real estate business is thriving. But the thing I remember most clearly, the thing that changed me, wasn't the victory over Karen. It was the moment I realized that I'd been willing to lie to protect myself, instead of trusting the person I loved enough to tell him the truth. That secret I kept, the Turkish, the understanding, the 2 weeks of deception, taught me more about myself than anything else. It taught me that fear makes you stupid, that control is an illusion, and that sometimes the scariest thing you can do is just be honest and hope that the person you love is brave enough to stay. Karen and I don't have a relationship, but we've reached a détente. She knows that I know her now. She knows that I won't be bullied or manipulated, and she knows that if she tries, I have the evidence and the will to use it. That's not love, but it's peace. And after everything, I'll take it.